Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today I reached my highest ever ELO rating in Rapid on chess.com. After I won the match in this video, my rating was 1298. I have previously reached this exact value last year, but then over a few months dropped to almost 1100. It was during this decline that I decided to start my blog and YouTube channel as a motivator to learn and maintain my enthusiasm. This match started as a Ruy Lopez and then transposed into the Four Knights game. I consider this game a lucky win, as I should have lost from a calculation error in the middle game, but a moment's hesitation on the part of my opponent allowed me to come close to equalising. A further blunder in the rook and pawn endgame gave me the advantage. I'm hoping that I'll cross the 1300 barrier that has so far eluded me soon. Please enjoy! Let's start with the review. So, chess.com's algorithm, I played okay overall, 86%. Opponent played a little bit less accurately. However, if you look at the scoring analysis, we started off well, but as I'm not really that familiar with the Four Knights or the Spanish, my opponent actually came to a commanding lead, all the way to almost +8. Now, lucky for me, I was able to equalize, and a blunder on the part of my opponent led me to take the win. Let's move on now to the analysis. In this game, I started with the black pieces, opponent white, and opponent played e4. So I played e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop b5. So the beginning of the Ruy Lopez. Now, against the Ruy Lopez, I've generally been playing the Berlin defense, so developing the other knight, knight f6. And in this game, the opponent played knight c3, developing the other knight. So now transforming into the Four Knights game, the Spanish variation. So Ruy Lopez, also known as the Spanish game. Now, here I decided to try to play sort of just in a principled way. So bishop c5, opponent plays d3. Here I short castles, opponent also short castles. And as you can see in this position, we are dead even. I've reached this position before. Somehow I thought that this was probably good. I thought this was probably good as well. But I just couldn't remember, and then I eventually just chickened out because that move looks like I was potentially hanging that pawn, and so I ended up playing a6. And when I reviewed this, so that gives the advantage to white. I sort of almost immediately remembered on review that, oh yes, I've played this before, and yes, in fact, knight d4 is the best theoretical move. And the next best move after that is probably a slightly more conservative rook e8. I will probably play rook e8 next time because that sort of provides an extra defense for that pawn, allowing that knight potentially then to move. The opponent captures the knight, capture back with the d pawn, opening up the file for the queen. Knight captures, and of course the problem with this whole sequence is that I straight up lose a pawn in this exchange. I played bishop d4, so immediately sort of asking what the opponent was going to do with the knight. Of course, they can just straight up retreat back, making it the best move, counter-attacking the bishop. And here I developed bishop g4, pinning the knight to the queen. Still about +2.5. So that loss of a pawn is not a good strategy. So definitely a6 is not the right move earlier on. Opponent plays bishop e3, which was an interesting move here. Interesting move. Now I thought here that given that is defended and the knight is pinned, that this would be okay for me. But of course, the knight isn't actually pinned now that when I sort of actually review it, because they lose a queen. It's actually just a queen trade. So when you're winning equal material, it's not a pin. And more than that, the knight capturing the queen in this square, that knight is not subject to a further attack, while if I capture the queen with the bishop will potentially be lost. There's 3 different pieces that can capture it. So this was a straight up sort of miscalculation or a misunderstanding of the position, which actually I didn't really pick up until I analyzed it after the game. So here, rather than playing this move, defending, basically giving an extra defender to the bishop, also meaning that if the knight captures, I can capture back without putting the queen in danger. I made this other move. So here I thought that bishop was fine, and I was going to try to threaten this knight. Now this was a mistake, and you can see Stockfish calls it straight up blunder, +5. Opponent captures. Here I captured back again, still under the misapprehension that this was pinned. However, my opponent didn't capitalize. So they could have captured. I would capture back, but then they could capture my bishop, and then they're straight up a piece. Instead, they maybe hesitated, put an extra attacker on the bishop. At this point, there's no reason for me to not capture. And that's what I did. And here, there's still only +1 up the original pawn. And so things aren't looking quite so bad for me. Here I sort of centralize my rook, so rook fe8. Opponent sort of invites a trade of queens. I play c5 in this position, captures. I thought that was good because I had sort of another attack on that knight. And the opponent brings the knight back to e2, which makes sense. Here I had the opportunity to defend that pawn by c5, so capturing some of the space, so not losing anymore. So white is still advantageous, but I'm sort of controlling it. Opponent plays f4, which I thought was probably an okay move. However, I saw now that that knight had no defenders, so I thought that potentially getting the knight into these positions was potentially pretty good. And more than that, if they opted to capture, I could, that would sort of open up the file, and I could capture the opponent's knight. So that would end up just being a knight trade, but I would get my rook onto the second rank, which potentially again is good for me. And I thought that pawn on sort of d5 is probably okay because it's not entirely clear how the opponent was going to really defend that pawn in that position. So I played knight d5. Very happy to see on the analysis that was in fact the best move. They captured back. And here the opponent now makes a series of mistakes. So, potentially, I played this game in the morning. I think my opponent was an American, so playing sort of in the evening. Maybe they were a little bit more tired than me, but the end game with pawns and rooks was somewhat less accurate than their earlier part of the game. So here, rook back to e3, so basically keeping control of that file. Opponent plays king f1, which I suppose is okay. So Stockfish reckoned putting the rooks into a battery would have been better, but I thought like in that position it may not quite work. So I decided to just go straight after that pawn while I still had the opportunity to do so. They bring the other rook across, and again, relatively inaccurate. So we're moving towards equality. I capture back. I now capture that pawn, and so now we are equal. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We each have a rook, though their rook potentially controls the e file. So here I thought, never too late to hang back rank mate. So let's activate the king. Let's activate the king. Also protect the back rank. That's what I did. And here I think the opponent wanted to trade. I think maybe they thought they had the advantage, and potentially if I capture, looks like they sort of advance their pawn further forward. However, there's no defenses of that pawn. So if that pawn is on e5, these pawns can't do anything. These pawns are going to be separated from the e file, and my king is simply closer to that square than their king. So captures, and as you can see, now minus 6.7, so strongly in my favor. So captures, and now, yep, I've got my king, so further ahead, leading the pawns, and now I am a full pawn up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In a balanced game, when I have sort of a pawn majority, I'm likely to win. So they push g4, that's fine. I play f5. They opt not to capture, which I suppose kind of makes sense. However, there is now sort of a force field. The king can't enter. I sort of play h6, captures, and now if the opponent wants to sort of infiltrate on this side, they'll have to take a somewhat circuitous route, this way, and basically, if they tried that, my king is always just faster. So that's really not going to work. So I'm going to start pushing on this side, so create threats on both sides of the board. So captures, push, and basically at this point, my opponent opted to resign. But good game. I enjoyed this game. I should have lost, I thought. But you know, this allowed me to get to 1298. So GG to the opponent. A potential insight from this game is that when there are many threats and the game gets complicated, it is likely that the opponent will make an error. That was certainly the case for me. The opponent had an opportunity to straight up be up a piece due to my error. The risk with this strategy does mean that you could be the one who makes the error rather than your opponent. The second insight is that in rook and pawn endgames, take care in making sure that when advancing a pawn towards promotion, that it can be protected. A loss of a single pawn is often decisive. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.